All right, it's 3:02. We're going to go ahead and get started. I have a feeling we'll have some people joining us. I know CDE has some important things going on today, so we may grow as we go along. Just each year, we've provided by the way, I should introduce myself. I'm Bonnie McFarland, work with LCAP-State and Federal Programs Office. And every summer, we've provided a professional development training primarily for new project directors. Usually we spend a couple days going over all the program requirements. And in the past, what we found is that a number of experienced directors like to pop in because there are things they either want to brush up on or know more about. So this year we had to change our format based on the conditions now. So we decided to do a series of modules that would be provided online and allow people to come in and out as needed. So if you want to pick up one or two modules on particular programs, you can, or go through the whole series. Today's module is going to be primarily an overview of state and federal programs. So just so you know, if you've been around for a lot of years, this is probably not going to be a lot new for you today. Our subsequent modules will go more in depth into specific program requirements. We suggested that you purchase a copy of our State and Federal Programs Director's Handbook to accompany the series if you're new. And we are actually in the process of updating that handbook now to reflect current laws and requirements. And we've had a struggle keeping up with that this year because things have been changing so quickly, and we want it to be as current as possible for you. So what we're getting close to bringing that together. If you ordered a handbook subsequent to registering for the series, we will get you a new copy of that as soon as the new one is available. So don't worry about that. If you ordered the previous one, we'll make sure you get the new one out there. All right. We will be recording all of the sessions, and we will also be posting the PowerPoint slides. They'll be available at our LACO website under accountability, and it will be under state and federal programs. You'll find the recording, you'll find all the PowerPoints, and you can always contact us if you have any questions. So let's move ahead and take a look at the series. And throughout the series, we're looking at a number of topics that we will become familiar with. First of all, today is an overview of categorical programs, and we're going to zero in on federal programs particularly. Thursday, our next session is focused on district level planning, and then we'll be looking at school level planning, accountability and reporting requirements, and all the data management processes. We have a session on parent and family engagement. We have one on fiscal management that is going to be rather an in-depth one, audits and compliance requirements, and then finally equitable services requirements. So as you go through the modules, if you participate in multiple ones, you sometimes see that some of the topics are going to overlap a bit, and that's because the programs are interrelated. And sometimes you'll hear one in the context of one particular area, and then you'll see it addressed in another module in the context of that program requirement. Okay, so for today, as I said, we're looking at the basis for categorical programs. Then we're going to look at some key federal programs, the types of federal programs that are available to LEAs, and the intent and purpose of those programs. We often find that throughout the year, you're going to perhaps have questions, need assistance, and there are a variety of ways we're here to support you. We have monthly meetings. Those are now via Zoom and will be through December. We also have in-person meetings when those are possible, and we've had those in the past, both at central office in LACO and Downey, and also out in the Santa Clarita Antelope Valley area. So as the situation changes, hopefully we'll be able to move back to those and be out at those meetings. However, we're getting a lot of feedback. People really like the Zoom meetings, so we'll assess your needs. We also have workshops on specific topics. We just completed one on the consolidated application. We do that for each submission, equitable services requirements for private schools. We have specific topics on FPM and the LCAP. We do a lot of work on LCFF requirements and time and effort reporting. We've had some specific workshops on that, parent engagement, and school site councils. Okay, I think we went backward. I think we're still going backward. And okay, finally. Okay, and then individual questions. We're always here to help you. We have 5 consultants and coordinators in the office, and each of them works with specific programs for particular school districts and supporting them with the LCAP, but you can contact our main inbox for a quick response, or you can email any of us individually. If you email our main box, it will go to whoever is available and we'll get to you. That's the quickest way to get an answer. All right, next slide. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll stop periodically to collect those and answer as many as we can. If we can't answer them, don't get to them, or don't have an answer for you, we will get back and send out a Q&A following the sessions. All right, so let's start off with an overview of categorical programs. And we want to start with just a look at the overview, the programs, the purposes of the programs. We often find that administrators, when they get into working with particular the details of state and federal programs, particularly federal programs, that they struggle with compliance issues. And part of that is often because they don't understand the intent and purpose of the programs. So sometimes it feels like you're just checking off a lot of boxes and doing things just for the sake of doing them, rather than understanding the purpose. And usually we find when we talk with directors and they really get it about what the program's about, then the requirements sort of fall in place. Otherwise, they're just a lot of meaningless lists of things to do, and we hope that certainly doesn't make your job very pleasant, and we hope we can give you that context so when you work with them, you understand where you're headed. All right, next slide. So we heard this term categorical programs, and it's in some ways kind of an antiquated term, but they still do exist. And what they are state or federal programs that meet the needs of either specific student populations or specific programmatic areas. The funding for categorical programs is restricted, and with spending and program requirements that are specific to what that program intent and purpose is. And why do we have those programs? Well, generally it's a compelling state or national interest. Oftentimes it's because sometimes they're in response to a national issue. Sometimes they are they're based on constituent requests. Sometimes there's a perceived unmet need. We've had programs for library services in the past when that seemed to be an unmet need. So it could be for any of those reasons that a categorical program is created. However, next slide, we'll see that as we're moving forward, you're going to see some programs are what we call hybrids. They're sort of like a categorical program, but they're a little bit different. The focus remains the same with these programs, and the requirements, though, are generally more flexible and put that on the district to define. So you'll see how those play out. But the common lens in all the programs we're going to be talking about today is equity. You'll see at the bottom of it, all the programs work with in our office really have equity as the vision. And so I think if you can keep that in mind, you really see what the focus is. And a lot of the rules and requirements that may seem challenging or cumbersome really are there for the purpose of achieving equity. And keep in mind, equity isn't the same as equality. We know there are students with needs that differ, and how we achieve equity it's a big goal, and we've been working on it for years, but that's what the programs are about. So the equity lens in current terms means that while program models and designs and the requirements may vary, the focus remains on equity, and they all share the goal of closing achievement gaps. So now you've come in, if you're new to this, you've come in an interesting time when everything seems a little bit topsy-turvy. COVID-19 has sort of changed a lot of things. What has changed basically is the way we deliver instruction. That's significantly been changed. However, and state and federal programs, you've mentioned particularly federal programs, we've had a lot of waivers, and those waivers have impacted the timelines for using funds, for reporting on particular issues. Accountability has been impacted, but what hasn't changed under COVID-19 in terms of federal programs are, first of all, the needs of the students who are served by the programs. In fact, all you have to do is look in the newspaper and you see it. The needs of low-income students, of at-risk students have intensified and become even more evident in these times. So the needs haven't changed, and the intents and purposes and basic requirements of state and federal programs have changed. So although we've had federal waivers, the requirements for the programs are essentially the same. Okay. So if you're new to this job, your job is huge, okay? It requires, first of all, an understanding and a focus on the intent and purpose of major state and federal programs. What are they about? Your understanding of that is critical in providing leadership in your LEA. Also, beyond that, there's the specific fiscal and programmatic requirements for the programs you oversee. All the details of what's required, the things that are embedded in law, are your requirement, are part of your position. And then federal fiscal and program regulations that apply to all federal programs. You may oversee Title I or Title II programs, but there are some federal laws that apply to any federal program. If you take $1 of federal money, there are certain requirements that are triggered. So that comes under your need to know too. And we'll be looking at those in later modules in the series. Secondly, is your ability to support schools and districts in really implementing legally compliant programs. How do you keep them on the right track? When FPM, federal program monitoring, comes, you're the one they come and see, and they expect you to know the answers, and how do you keep the programs in compliance? But secondly, and even more important, is your ability to support your schools and your district in effectively planning for the use of funds and planning for programs, and evaluating those programs to determine their effectiveness, and then effectively using those programs and modifying them going forward to close achievement gaps. In the past, some of these different positions were spread about in under different hats, but now they sort of all fall under the state and federal programs director's hat. All right. So, first thing to keep in mind is that it all starts with a plan. For most of the programs, there's some basic planning requirement, and we'll be talking about those in future modules. The LCAP, the Local Control and Accountability Plan, is our state plan. The LCAP Federal Addendum is the federally required plan, and we'll be talking about those in our next module, which will be about district planning. Then we have school level plans, and we'll also be talking about that in our third module. Oops, can we back up a sec? Oh, there we are. Okay. And then secondly, keep your eye on the money. One of the things we mentioned is your requirement to know what are allowable costs. What are your timelines for use of funds? If you don't, federal funds have a timeline expenditure requirement, so you need to be watching on that. How to estimate funding so you can help your schools plan ahead, and we'll be talking about that in the 6th module on fiscal requirements. And then documentation and reporting, fiscal reporting, accountability reporting, and then consultation and planning and documenting involvement of stakeholders. So all of that will be talked about in our 4th module on documentation and reporting. Okay, next slide. Some key vocabulary and acronyms. As you know, there are hundreds of them, but we just wanted to focus on a few that sometimes confuse people and are used frequently. The first one, LEA, is a local education agency. This has become more important as we've had the growth of charter schools. In the past, we just used the term district, and now we have charter schools, and we also have county offices of education that receive funding. So generally, when you hear the term local education agency, or more often LEA, it includes school districts, charter schools, and county offices of education. When you hear legislation referred to, and it only addresses school districts, then generally charter schools and county offices are not included. I can't say this is exclusive because we have a lot of laws on the books that are old education code, and they were before people really thought a lot about charters. We didn't have as many, and so the word district sometimes is used more generically. But generally in recent legislation, you will see that LEA is used as the term of choice when we're referring to all three entities. You'll see the term SEA sometimes. That refers to the state educational agency. You usually see that in federal law or federal documents. In California, that means the California Department of Education, CDE. So the state education agency for California is the California Department of Education, CDE. The other acronym is for the U.S. Department of Education, and you often see that referred to as ED, ED. Okay? So if you see that in a document, they're talking to the United States Department of Education, the federal department. The next two, we just want to clarify. ESEA is the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and sometimes you'll see that, and sometimes you'll see ESSA, ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act. Actually, those terms are the same. However, ESEA refers to the original Elementary and Secondary Act, which was passed in 1965. That law has changed over the years, and every few years it gets renamed as it's reauthorized. The current authorization is the Every Student Succeeds Act, but sometimes those terms are used interchangeably, so don't be confused by those. LCFF refers to the local control funding formula, which we'll be talking about next time, and that's how funds are currently allocated to California's LEAs. The LCAP, the Local Control and Accountability Plan, and the SPSA, or SIPSA as some people call it, is a school plan for student achievement required for schools receiving Title I funds. And then FPM, maybe that's the acronym you aren't going to want to hear, but that's Federal Program Monitoring. That's when CDE has selected you to come to review your state and federal programs. All right, next. So, as you're aware, education is primarily a state and local responsibility in the United States. Okay? This is especially true for elementary and secondary schools, where about 92% of the funds come from non-federal sources. You may not feel that way if you work with federal programs, because you'll feel like 92% of your job is about federal programs, and it probably will be. But the funding is basically a state responsibility, and supporting elementary and secondary education is a state responsibility. You're going to see that play out in a number of ways in laws and requirements, particularly in the supplement not supplant requirement, which we'll discuss a little bit. And that sort of shows how states are the main entity responsible for providing education, and federal programs come on top of that. The 8% in federal funds doesn't just come from the Department of Education, but it comes from other federal agencies too, including Department of Agriculture, School Lunch Program, and programs like Head Start. All right. So, in spite of the fact that they're a small part of the budget, federal programs have had a significant impact on shaping the direction of programs. A lot of innovations have started with federal programs. We have had programs in the past that provided seed money for programs that then took off at the district level. In California, our categorical program model that we had in the past was really based on the federal model. So the impact is huge. And we'll take a look in the next slide at how that sort of played out over the years. The Department of Education was established in 1867, and since then it's had some sort of milestones. It was initially seen as an emergency response organization to support schools in case of emergency. But its first big impact came and began some agricultural vocational training started. But World War II was really the first big impact, and that was the GI Bill. Although that wasn't about elementary and secondary education, it had a huge impact on our GIs coming back from the war who would have struggled because they missed out on those years when they were at the war, and they were not able to go to college, and then came back and didn't have money to do that. So the GI Bill, a lot of your probably grandfathers may have benefited from that GI Bill. So that was a significant impact. Then we had math and science were a focus in the late 50s, early 60s, as we got into the Cold War. The 1960s and 70s, we had a lot of civil rights legislation taking place, and that was the birth of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. The belief there was that if children were in poverty, the way out was through education. And as a nation, we made a commitment to support our neediest children with services to support them educationally, because we believed that would make a difference in their lives. So that really that's one program that's lasted. As I said, ESSA is still the basis of the current ESSA program. After that, we had other groups that were benefiting from federal programs, and that's when IDEA came into place. Then we've had major reauthorizations since then. We had the No Child Left Behind Act. You can see all those ECIA and 81, and then NCLB, No Child Left Behind, was a major change in the focus of federal education programs. And that wasn't reauthorized until 2015 with our most current bill, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. So that's just kind of a 1, 2, 3 of how federal programs have impacted our schools. So let's take a look at the Every Student Succeeds Act. Came into law December 10th, 2015. It reauthorized and replaced the No Child Left Behind Act. It was actually seen as sort of a backlash to NCLB, which appeared to have a very strict focus on reading and math, and had particularly high goals for achievement and sanctions associated with those goals. The issue was that NCLB, as you saw in the last slide, didn't get reauthorized for so long that although the goals were lofty, we were almost reaching them at the time it was reauthorized. And so numerous schools and districts were identified for improvement. So now we have ESSA, which maintains 4 formula grant programs we'll look at today. It moved accountability from the federal level, so rather than federally imposed sanctions, they're state level sanctions. And it increased flexibility and local decision making. And it eliminated the federally, as I said, imposed sanctions for low performing schools, moved from sanctions to a support-based system. So let's take a quick look now, before we go into federal programs, let's take a quick look at state programs in California. And we'll focus on them more in the next session, but just want to take a review from a historical perspective as to how those programs have evolved. 1970s, following 1965, you remember it was the ESSA. Following that, we had multiple individual targeted categorical programs in California. We had numerous programs. They kept growing. That we had something called Economic Impact Aid, which in many ways was modeled after Title I, but it was at the state level. Around 2004, people began to look at block grants. So some of those multiple programs started getting put out not as individual programs, but as groups of programs where there was flexibility to move funds around within a block. And then in 2008, we moved, and that was when we had the fiscal crisis, we moved to tiered flexibility. That provided some more flexibility for certain programs and kept restrictions on others. Finally, in 2013, the local control funding formula eliminated most of the state categorical programs and replaced it with a new funding model. It in the past, by the time we got to 2013, just to give you a perspective on this, we had 43 separate categorical programs in the state of California, and they're still posted on the CD website. If you dig for them, you can find what they were. But if you look at each of those, it's hard to find any program you'd say this is a bad or not an important program. But it does point out the challenge that you have now in terms of working with state programs. Those 43 programs represent interest groups and stakeholders who believe in those programs. In the past, there was funding targeted just for those programs and services. Now it's the district that has to make those decisions. So it's up to you at the district to determine those priorities and how those funds are used. So if it feels harder, it actually is, because local control is harder than having the rules dictated to you. But it certainly can be worth the effort. All right, next slide is, so this California model was really, was something new, and it's one of the hybrids that we mentioned earlier. After years of effort at school reform to try to balance how school funding could balance flexibility with the needs of at-risk students, we finally got to the local control funding formula. And it was a long journey, and that's because previously funding for at-risk students was protected because it was allocated through a dedicated funding stream with specific rules and spending requirements around it. And that made it easier in some ways to manage. Under LCFF, the funding goes out as one general fund allocation with additional funds allocated based on at-risk student groups. LEAs are required to increase or improve services for those students, but they have flexibility how to do that, and it's based on the district plan, the LCAP. And again, the problem that got us, we finally got to this answer, the reason it took so long was the concerns of certainly constituency groups who cares about those students to say, if we give districts this flexibility, will they continue to meet the needs of those at-risk students? And so that's our challenge as districts, to prove them, yes, we will do that. Okay. So why do categorical programs end, right? Well, the first ones may be a little idealistic. The need no longer exists. Unfortunately, we haven't seen that happen. Categorical programs, particularly under ESSA, you look at the needs of poor children, they were different in 1965, but we can't say they no longer exist. So ideally, that would be a nice way for a program to end. More often, a way they might be end is because they're seen as overly prescriptive or inhibiting innovation. And this is what happened with NCLB, that it was seen as too prescriptive. The other is they're poorly implemented. If they're poorly implemented or there's no data to support their effectiveness, then chances are there's not going to be support in the legislature for those programs. Why do they return once they're gone? Because the needs of the populations that are there aren't being met. So this is our commitment to our at-risk students. We have to do a good job with these programs, or it'll return to a categorical model that's more restrictive. All right. So I think we talked about this, state and federal, what your job is. It's compliance, but it's also planning requirements. All right, so let's move on to, well, before we do, Adrian, are there any questions before we move into federal programs?
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Adrienne. And at this point, Bonnie, we have no questions.
I think she said no questions.
No questions.
Okay. All right. Okay. That's good news. All right. So let's move on to federal programs. All right. So we're going to take a look at key federal programs. First of all, one of the important things you'll want to know is, how do I get the money? All right. So that's what we're going to look at here. What's the application process and how funds get to districts? Okay. So on the left-hand side, you're going to see different types of funding. And then on the right-hand side, how those funds are allocated out and what the application process is. So first of all, we have formula grant funds. And most ESSA programs are formula grant funds, and the most that you're familiar with. A formula grant means the funds are allocated to you based on a formula. It's either numbers of low-income students, numbers of English learners, some kind of formula. And those there are 4 main ones: Title I, II, III, and IV. And those are all allocated through what we call the consolidated application. The funding comes from the U.S. Department of Education to the California Department of Education, and they are responsible for allocating the funds out to districts. So that's how the money comes through, and that's why the consolidated application is so important. If you don't complete the application, you don't get the money. So very important. The second type of grants are discretionary grant funds. And most of these are competitive, but not all of them. But those are grants that you don't automatically receive. They're generally not based on a formula, but you have to write to certain criteria of some sort. So you submit an application, and the program requirements are generally embedded in your grant application. Whereas for formula grants, the law includes all the program requirements. Whereas with discretionary grants, generally your application defines how you have to spend the money. Usually, discretionary grants are a separate application from the U.S. Department of Education directly to the district, or they could be through the California Department of Education. An example of that are Comprehensive School Improvement Funds, CSI. Those are discretionary grant funds, although CDE puts them out pretty much to anyone who applies, but they are discretionary. They come from the U.S. Department of Education, they go to the state, and then you wrote an application to CDE for those funds. So they are not formula grant driven, they're discretionary. Then there are 2 other types of grants. One is a direct grant, and that's a grant where you as an LEA apply directly to the U.S. Department of Education. These are usually challenging, to be honest, because CDE is kind of close. They're more user-friendly, I would say, and trying to apply for a grant to the U.S. Department of Education can be challenging. But some grants, you can watch the U.S. Department site, and periodically there will be grants that pop up that might be particularly beneficial to your particular agency, but they are a little more challenging to get because you have to work with the federal office. A sub-grant, and whoops, I should mention what the word term grantee. If you get a direct grant from an agency, then you are the grantee. It doesn't go through anyone else. But a sub-grant means the funds go from one agency to another, who then allocates them to you. And this is the case with most ESSA grants. The grants are from the federal government. They go to CDE. CDE sends the funds to you. So you then become the sub-grantee. Okay. All right, so that's how the money gets to you. We have some major federal programs, just to be aware. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act, ESSA or ESSA, is one grant that includes multiple programs. IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities, is a separate law. It's separate. It's not included in the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. So it's totally separate law, separate program. The other one that's a big program is what used to be Carl Perkins and now is Career and Technical Education for the 21st Centuries. So those are some big chunks of funding, and IDEA and Perkins are a little more focused with students with disabilities for IDEA, CTE in Perkins, whereas the Elementary and Secondary Education Act includes multiple kinds of programs that, as you'll see in just a minute. All right. Related requirements. This is just important to know that there are related federal legal requirements that get triggered when you take any federal money. And sometimes people are surprised at this, and it pops up when you're in FPM, and you'll say, why am I getting reviewed on this? I didn't agree to this. Well, actually you did. When you complete the consolidated application, you agree to a series of legal assurances, and included in those assurances are things like requirements for disability discrimination, sex discrimination, Civil Rights Act requirements, things to do with FERPA, and of course, English learner requirements. This is always a surprise to people. People will get a compliance finding and say, well, I don't take any Title III funds. Why am I getting reviewed on that? you have responsibilities to English learners whether or not you take any federal Title III funds. So these are things that are not probably at the top of your mind that you're thinking about, but just keep in mind, once you take federal money, you're agreeing to abide by these requirements. You also need to be aware that there are state laws and requirements that impact federal money. A couple examples of those. One is there's a rule in California for Title I that you have to spend 85% of Title I funds on direct services for students. People think that's in federal law. It's not. It's actually in Ed Code 63001. So it's state law that has implications for how you use your federal funds. So again, under ESSA, the accountability requirements, I mentioned that ESSA moved them from the feds to the state. So the state had to write a plan and get it approved by the feds, but the state, in the state plan, described our accountability system. So that's a state accountability system. So although you're taking federal money, there are state laws that apply. All right. Okay, just wanted to share this because this can be a source of confusion, and it's still a source of confusion for me sometimes, because sometimes you will see requirements under the Every Student Succeeds Act referred to in different ways. And the middle column there where you see ESSA section, those are the actual sections in the law. So section 1112, if you go to a copy of the law, section 1112 is going to talk about LEA plans. 113 is going to talk about school attendance areas. 1114 is school-wide programs. Oftentimes, though, you will see different numbers referring to the same topic, and that's under U.S. code. When you look at the Federal Program Monitoring Instrument, you're going to see a different numbering system. So 6312 is going to refer to LEA plans, which would be our addendum. But in the law, it's 11112. So just be aware, and you kind of have to dig through. I know there's a rhyme or reason for this, and you can kind of follow it. But the point is, when a law is passed, like in California, we pass a law and it's in the bill with certain numbers, then they codify it. It goes into Ed Code. It comes out with an Ed Code number. It's the same thing with federal law. So the section of the law sometimes isn't what you'll see when you're trying to find it if you're looking at certain documents, and FPM is the key one. All right, so ESSA includes 9 titles, and Title I is probably the most common one that most people receive, and there are 3 parts to it, though. And so often you'll hear people say Title I Part A, and why are they saying Part A? Because Part A is the funding that most districts receive. It's for improving academic achievement for the disadvantaged. That's the title of the law. So Title I Part A is the funds most of you described. There's also a Part C, which is migrant education, and you might be involved in that. And then Part D is neglected and delinquent programs. Those are programs specifically for institutionalized youth and usually are allocated to county offices of education. So Title I has multiple parts included in it. And Part A is the one that you care about, I'm sure. Title II, again, Part A, is preparing teachers and recruiting highly qualified teachers. And that is under Title II, there are multiple parts, but Part A and Title II are the funds that go out to districts for professional development primarily. Title III, language instruction for English learners and immigrant students. So there are 2 parts to that one. Next is Title IV, has 2 key parts, and they represent 2 of the kinds of programs we talked about a little while ago. Title IV Part A, which is new in ESSA, is the Student Support and Academic Enrichment Grants. And these are the ones you have 3 different categories you can use funds in, and we have some waivers, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about Title IV later. Part B and Title IV Part A is a formula grant. Remember we said formula grants go out by a formula based on numbers of particular types of students. Part B is a competitive grant, and that's your after-school programs, your 21st century learning centers. So those are competitive grants versus Part A, which comes to you automatically. Title V is interesting because it does have some programs in it, but it also has some other allowabilities. And the first one is transferability. So your ability to transfer funds among programs comes from Title V. And in addition, there are programs there for rural education. Okay, we're going to look a little bit more in depth at those in a bit. Title VI is Indian education, Native Hawaiian, Alaskan Native. Title VII is impact aid, which we'll talk about in a little while. Most of our districts don't get that, but we'll talk about who would receive it. Title VIII is called General Provisions, and it's sort of a catch-all. It includes a lot of things. There's no funding programs in there, but there are a lot of requirements embedded. You can see school prayer requirement, access to armed services, recruiters, all that's in Title VIII. And then Title IX is McKinney-Vento Homeless, which is, again, a discretionary grant that you have to apply for. Okay. So federal funds must supplement, not supplant, state and local funds. And this goes back to what we said earlier. Federal education is a state responsibility, so federal funds come on top of that and supplement it. And so what it means is funds are to be used in a manner that supplements what would, in the absence of those funds, be made available for students. The way that this is tested under ESSA changed, and this caused a lot of confusion because people thought supplement, not supplant, went away. It didn't go away, but it did change in terms of how it's tested in Title I. But the term itself is found 52 times in the law, so it's definitely still there. Okay. All right, next. So Title I. We're going to dive in Title I. It's the primary program under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. It's the one that's been there from the beginning, and the purpose is really to provide all students a significant opportunity to receive fair, equitable, high-quality education and to close achievement gaps. So it's really about academic focus, closing achievement gaps, and so you can see the focus is academic, the needs are low-achieving students. Right. Next. The funding formula for Title I is based on census poverty data. So the funding comes from the feds. They look at census. That's why what's happening right now with poverty data is critical. This is how you get your Title I funding, is based on these numbers. The count of low-income children, the funding is based on children aged 5 through 17. As you'll see later, you can serve children in your schools younger and older than that. So serving them is different, but they don't generate funding. It includes three separate grants, and those grants are really focused on getting the funds to the highest poverty schools. You generally don't see those three grant amounts. They come out as a single allocation, but there's a concentration grant for higher poverty schools. There's a weighted count grant. All of these designed to push money into high poverty LEAs. At the state level, when the funds come to the state, things change a bit. Sometimes you'll see, when you see an allocation you'll see federal money posted somewhere and you say, oh, this is how much money I'm getting. You can't count on that because when the funds get to the state, they have to make some adjustments. One of them is for charter schools and county offices. And that's because charter schools and counties don't have a district boundaries. And census data is based on where people live. So you can see for charter schools that really doesn't work too well because the children don't reside in any particular area. So for those, they have to adjust it with using free and reduced price meal counts. And then we have something called Hold Harmless, which is an important thing to know about. We'll talk about in the next slide or two. Title I does require school level allocations, and it's based on a ranking formula using the percentage of high poverty children. So again, what you see here, everything about Title I pushes the money to your highest poverty schools. Okay. So Hold Harmless. The reason this is important is because you're always getting questions from your schools. How much money am I getting next year? And how can I plan? I don't know how much money to expect. The Hold Harmless provision can be extremely helpful to you here, knowing about it. What it means is that for Title I, under Section 1122, that just LEAs should receive no less than 95, 90, or 85% of their prior year's entitlement. Okay? And this is based on your poverty level. So we tell LEAs that they can plan at least on 85% of the prior year's funding amount when planning for the subsequent year. Now, that I used to feel a lot more confident saying that because I thought I didn't realize all the things that can happen in life to change things. But if funding suddenly disappeared or the state amount went down significantly, certainly and the whole state didn't get enough money to fund all its schools, that could be problematic. Then everybody might have to go below that level. But essentially, that's what CDE does. They take all the money that comes in, and you may be expecting a slight increase because your numbers went up a bit, but it didn't go up. And that could be because your neighbor next door fell below the 85% level and they had to make them whole. So all that money kind of gets spread around that way. But it does help you plan that you can, if you're a pessimist and if you can go with the 85. If you're a little more optimistic, you can up that. But we generally say 85% of prior year's funding is safe for planning purposes. Okay. All right, so I mentioned that charter schools and county offices don't have census data, so they have to use something different. And as I mentioned, they use free and reduced price meal data is used for charter schools and county offices. So that's another reason why districts allocations can be changed. If you expected a higher amount, sometimes those funds have to come off to fund all the charters and county offices, because at the federal level, they don't count those because they don't generate census numbers. So that can change it. But again, you still have that hold harmless to hang on to. Okay. And free and reduced. Okay. Title I school allocations, important to remember, Title I is actually the only of the formula grants, the only one that's really designed as a school level program. So districts have to annually rank their schools, serve them in order of poverty. All schools over 75% have to be served. A new provision in ESSA allows high schools at or above 50% to be served prior to serving other schools, so you can push up your high schools, because they were finding that high schools often were getting left out. And then schools at or above the district average and at least 35% poverty are eligible to be served. But keep in mind, you don't have to serve every eligible school. And that's really important to think about as to how are you using your funds wisely. And then, as we said, state law requires 85% of those funds to be spent on direct services for students at school sites. Yeah. Title I also allows for district level or LEA level reservations. Reservations are funds that are taken off the top of your allocation prior to allocating funds to schools. However, all of those funds must be spent at Title I school sites. Okay? There are some required reservations to reserve funds for parent and family engagement. In fact, they even tell you how much. You have to reserve 1% of your allocation, and at least 90% of that has to go directly to schools. So it does allow for some funds to be used for district level parent engagement activities. You have to reserve funds for homeless youth, and there's no definition of the amount, but you must reserve funds for homeless youth and have a rationale as to what you reserve. If you serve neglected and delinquent youth, there's a reservation there. That doesn't apply to most districts. Choice-related transportation, that's only if you still have students in schools who transferred under NCLB. This should be close to the last year for that, but that would only be if you have to reserve funds to provide transportation if they transferred under the old NCLB laws. And then equitable services, which is huge, and we'll talk about that separately in another Zoom meeting. But equitable services is required, and it's required for all titles, and that's services for eligible private schools. And that doesn't apply to charter schools, it applies again to school districts. Then there are authorized reservations, and those are district-wide activities that are provided centrally, but they're for Title I schools only. And we've been informed by CDE that all reservations need to be show up in school plans and show how they're supporting the school. All right. So we talked a lot about poverty. That's where the funding goes, but academic needs drive the program decisions. So let's take a look at how that plays out, okay? So LEAs are funded for Title I, as we said, based on poverty data, and schools are identified for their funding based on poverty. You're ranking them. But serving students has nothing to do with poverty or income. It's based totally on academic criteria focused on serving the most at-risk students to meet state standards. So while funding's directed to low-income communities, the services are about academic achievement. Sorry, that's Daisy, my talkative dog. All right. Okay, next slide. So for Title I, you have two types of program models. And one is called a targeted assistance, and the other is called a school-wide program. And if you're new to the district, you want to know, how do I know which is which? Well, when you look in your consolidated application, there's a page in there that will identify which schools are operating a school-wide program model. Okay. So let's take a look at targeted assistance programs. You won't see as many of those operating now as you used to, but they are what we call the default program, because when you first identify a school for Title I, they should start as a targeted program. That's because there are specific requirements for school-wide programs that take time to put in place. So if you have a new school, brand new, they should start with a targeted model. In a targeted model, the funds have to be used for students who have the greatest need for academic assistance. And who are the students most at risk of not meeting state standards? This is a model when you're working with private schools. This is where targeted assistance comes in handy, because this is the model used for services for private schools. Okay, so how do you determine it? Your pool of eligibility is your eligible students. And remember, we said you're funded 5 through 17, but you could include preschool students or students through grade 12, even up to 21 if they're eligible and enrolled in your school. And you need to determine who out of those students, who are those who are most at risk of meeting state standards. This has to be determined annually, and in a targeted program, the school has to maintain a list of who those students are. And you'll be asked for that during a review process. You won't submit electronically because that's not allowed. But when we go back to on-site reviews, they want to see who the students are, because that's the bottom line for a targeted program. Are the students you've identified the ones who are getting the services? So you need either a school plan or other planning documents should describe the services that those students are receiving. There's criteria that needs to be developed for identifying those students. The criteria is developed by the district, but the school can add additional criteria. But there are three things that are critical. It must be multiple criteria, multiple meaning more than one. It has to be educationally related. Okay, so it's about academic achievement, and it needs to be objective. And that's except for preschool through grade 2, where teacher judgment and parent interviews could be used. But other than that, it has to be something that's objective. So those are the three criteria: multiple, educationally related, objective criteria. You determine how you're going to identify your most at-risk students. All right. So next, we're automatic eligibility. Some students are automatically eligible if they can benefit from students. So students who might be in community day programs, neglected or delinquent don't apply to most of you, but homeless students, students who were in a migrant program, in Head Start for the previous 2 years, if those students don't meet the criteria, but they could benefit from the services in a targeted program, you can serve those students automatically. Requirements, again, the services in a targeted program provided only to eligible students. So it's not like a school-wide. You have to have just those kids that you identified are getting the services. There's something called simultaneous service, which means that the program's designed to meet the needs of your Title I students, but if you can incidentally help another child and it doesn't decrease the services that you're giving to your Title I students or exclude them from services, you can serve those students. This was in response to, in the past, it was like an instructional aid answered a question for another student. That was a no-no. And under the simultaneous service, that wouldn't be a problem. The funds are used to, again, assist eligible students in meeting state academic standards. So this is a targeted program, and that's usually going to be the kind of program you want to operate in a school with that has a low poverty threshold. School-wide programs are a whole other animal, right? School-wide programs include 3 core elements. The first is a comprehensive needs assessment of the entire school. And that needs assessment needs to be used to develop a school-wide plan that's based on the needs of that assessment. And reviewers are going to look for a connection between those two. How's what you're doing in your plan connected to the needs you identified for your students? And then finally, an annual review and evaluation of the plan, and then revising the plan as needed to ensure continuous improvement based on those needs. The school-wide plan is critical in a school-wide program. That's your audit document. That's what a reviewer or an auditor is going to look at to determine allowable expenditures. If you didn't have an approved activity with a budgeted item, your school site council approved, then that's not an allowable expenditure. So you can see how the plan is critical. The needs assessment in law, it says it should take a year. It should be a year-long process, so you can see what they're talking about, a really in-depth process. And that's why a school that's first year in shouldn't be school-wide. Okay, school-wide programs. To be eligible, a school has to have a poverty threshold of 40%, so at least 40% poverty. However, under ESSA, there's a new waiver allowed. It's a district level waiver, and it has to be submitted to CDE through the consolidated application. It's a box on the CON app that you have to approve. There's certain criteria, and if the school meets those criteria and the board approves it, they can operate a school-wide program. The funds have to supplement the amount of funds that would otherwise be made available to the school, including funding for disabled students and English learners. So for Title I, this is the change in supplement, not supplant. It's a fiscal test. Because you don't have a list of students, you can't say, did Harry get the services like you did in a targeted program? You're looking at the plan as the criteria. Think about this, though, when you look at that poverty criteria and how you're identifying and talking about schools going school-wide, think about the rationale for Title I. What do we talk about? The focus is on most at-risk students. And the reason they used school-wide was they said that the rationale was that once a school reaches a certain level of poverty, it makes sense to improve the whole program for most students rather than identifying individual students. But as you move lower and lower on that poverty threshold, it becomes questionable the degree to which a school-wide program really meets that purpose. And secondly, in a school-wide program, you have to look at if it's a lower poverty school and you're pushing the money down too far, do they have enough money to actually operate a program effectively? So a lot of considerations for you as a decision maker. All right, how do you know? And we mentioned this before, look on your CON app. There is a page that says school-wide notice of authorization. You'll find the date the board originally approved your school-wide status on that page. If you have a waiver, you have to put the date of the waiver. The waiver is the school board's approval for the school to begin the planning process. So the waiver approval has to precede school-wide plan approval. And it will show your percentage at the time of identification. You have an opportunity to up that page annually. So if you have new schools going school-wide, you need to add them to that list. Okay. All right. We mentioned, and we'll talk about this more in the fiscal section, but we mentioned the difference in ESSA, that they changed the Title I supplement, not supplant test. And that test is that districts must have, or LEAs, and I say districts here because usually charter schools only have one school, so it doesn't apply. But if you have multiple schools, you have to show how your funds are allocated in a manner that ensures your Title I schools get all the money they would have gotten if they weren't getting Title I. So essentially, it's got to be a Title I neutral way of allocating funds. In other words, you don't take Title I into, oh, they're getting Title I, so I won't give them this. Can't do that. You got to show how they get equal funding. And if you have district level expenditures, those also have to be Title I neutral. So you can't say, well, we'll put this district operated program over there with our district money and make Title I pay for it the other school. Can't do that either. So that methodology is checked through compliance monitoring. All right, that was Title I. Adrian, do we have any Title I questions? Well,
Okay,
Jim.
we have a few. So the first one was towards the beginning, and it was asked, would MSAP be an example of that? And it's a direct grant. I believe it's the Magnet Schools Assistance Program, federal USDE program.
Would it be an example of a
direct grant, I believe, is what the question is?
Yeah.
Would that be an example?
Yeah, I would have to check, and I can put that in the Q&As. We'll have to check, but yes, it would sound like that does not come, that's nothing that CDE, it's not in the application, so it appears it would require a separate application directly to the U.S. Department, but we'll double check on that for you. Good question.
Great. The next one is, what if 95% of the district qualifies for Title I? Would the plan be improved academic achievement for all students?
Well, again, Title I's a school level, so you have to look at the percentage of each school. So it's not district overall. You have to rank your schools based on the percentage at each school. So, you know, what if a school has 95% poverty, then they'd be a very good candidate for a school-wide program. So then the next question is, what's the process? How are they going to develop that? What's their needs assessment? And how are they going to focus? Also, a school with 95% poverty probably be getting more funding than other schools, so they're more capable of operating a school-wide program. But district poverty level only applies when you're talking about ranking, and that schools have to be at least at the district average. Ooh, wow, that could really, if you have a district-wide 95% poverty level, yeah,
right.
Yeah, that could impact the number of schools you're going to serve. Yeah.
The next question is, could you speak to high schools that have finally reached the 12th grade and would like to go school-wide?
High schools that have finally reached the 12th grade?
It probably was I understand it as a high school that perhaps each year added a grade level. So now they have full grade levels of a high school.
Oh,
up to 12th grade now.
So they were their program previously served specific grade levels, and now they're looking at serving including 12th grade. Is that your understanding?
I'm believing that it was perhaps a high school that started out, and then they, as each year, they added a grade level. So now they have all grade levels at the high school.
Yeah, so you'd want to sit down with your school site council and talk about, so now that we have, you know, all of these, how does that impact our plan? Has that changed our needs? And revise your plan to ensure you're meeting the needs of all those grade levels, if that's the best use of funds. So yeah, that would be a good conversation to have. If they're not school-wide and that might be a time to have that conversation about doing that. But yeah, I can see it. This sounds like the school's been growing each year, and now you're a full school program through 12th grade. So yeah, good time to have a conversation with your do you want to change the focus? What are we going to do? Should we do something different for 12th graders? How have we been using our funds before? Your focus might change. Sounds like your whole school's changing. So yeah, important conversation.
And one last question, it's not there, but if you have, say, a school that is new and they're growing and adding a grade level each year, are they defaulted to the TOS to begin with? And then, like, let's say that they have 9th and 10th graders, and then moving forward, are they able to convert from the TOS to Schoolwide with like just those grade levels, or do they have to wait for all 4 grade levels at a high school?
No, the model that you choose isn't impacted by the grade levels served. So if you start a school, and as I say, you should always start with the targeted assistant so you can do your needs assessment. Besides, you got too much going the first year of a school to figure out without writing the Title I plan. So get that going. You operate a targeted program, but then you can immediately start looking at, okay, we want to move to Schoolwide. What would our needs be? Now we're 9th grade. And then next year, if you add a grade, you're going to revise that plan saying, wow, things are changing. Now we're going to have 10th graders and their needs might be different. How are we going to update our plan? But you could operate a school-wide model each year as your school grows, because that's the kids you have and that's the grade you serve. That's your school. So there's no prohibition on waiting till you have full 4 grades in a high school.
Great, thank you so much. I believe that's it for questions at this time.
Okay, so we're on the downhill side here, honest, and we're on Title II Part A. Okay, so Title II Part A is and we're going to everything now. You've got to change your whole mindset around here, because now that we've left Title I, which is a school level program, we're looking at programs that are district level programs. And so Title II is the first one. So the funding goes to the district. There is no requirement in Title II to provide funding to schools or to allocate individual amounts to schools. You certainly can. There's no prohibition. And services obviously take place where the students are, usually at schools and teachers, but it can be operated, and usually is operated, from the district level. The focus in Title II is increasing student achievement, really, and by improving the quality and effectiveness of teachers, principals, and other school leaders. So it does include principals, not just teacher training, and also to increase the number of those staff who are effective in providing achievement. And it does have a focus on providing low-income minority students greater access to effective principals and teachers and school leaders. Those of you that did the LCAP federal addendum last year found that really challenging question you had to answer about educator equity, and that is what they're talking about here. However, it pops up in Title I as a requirement, but that is the focus, to make sure our neediest kids have our best teachers, or our most qualified teachers. So next slide looks at the entitlement, and it said it's a district level entitlement, and the funding for this, it also changed under ESSA. It used to be more focused on just student enrollment. Now the formula has changed, and it's 80% based on your poverty count and 20% on total enrollment. So you can see, you're going to see this in a lot of federal programs. They really push the needle toward an emphasis on low-income students. Allowable costs is high quality professional development. Class size reduction still remains in there as an option. Teacher recruitment and retention. So again, improving the quality of your teaching force. Okay, and LEA and state plans have to address how they'll address disparities resulting from low-income minority students being taught at higher rates than other students. And we're going to be spending some time on this throughout the year, looking at it, because the state definitions for ineffective, out-of-field, and inexperienced teachers have changed somewhat this year, and that's going to affect your use of how you're supporting those low-income minority students in having those teachers. We're not sure if that's going to require any additional reporting, but it is something to keep on your radar. It does another something new in Title II, and again, we said you're seeing that push, looking at low-income communities. It requires prioritizing two types of schools. One is your schools identified for improvement. That's your CSI, ATSI schools. So if you have those, they should be prioritized, and your high poverty schools should be prioritized. And you had to write to that in your federal addendum how you're doing that. So you might want to take a look at that, especially if you're getting a review, and see how you said you're doing that. And if it's not the way you're doing it, you might want to change your addendum or change the way you're prioritizing. So just a clue there, they are looking at that. That's Title II. It's probably the least restrictive of the programs. We talk programs in terms of restrictive, least restrictive, most restrictive. Title II is probably the least restrictive because it's professional development. It's for principals, teachers, school leaders. So it's a lot more broad in terms of use of funds. Now we're going to get to the most restrictive, and that's Title III, English Learner and Immigrant Funds. This is, again, a district level allocation. No requirement for school level allocations here. There's two separate grants. One's for English learners and one's for immigrant students. And they're based on the percentages of English learners based on CalPADS and immigrant students. Immigrant funding, some of you may have gotten a surprise this year and may have gotten it when you've never had it in the past. There's a requirement you have 21 students who are immigrant students, and they used to be 2% increase over 2 years. Now it's only 1% increase. So you may be receiving immigrant funding and didn't expect it. If you're receiving under $10,000 in Title III EL funds, you have to join a consortia. The lead for the consortia receives the funds, and then they support services to all the schools in the consortia. So that's specific to the Title III EL. And the purpose is really, and generally it's really twofold. It's supporting students in terms of English proficiency and academic achievement. So it's really important to keep, that's our goal for English learners, is that they achieve English proficiency, but at the same time, they also meet the same challenging state academic standards that all students are expected to achieve. Okay. There are some new requirements this year in terms of Title III. As always, language instruction, supporting teachers and staff in developing and implementing language instructional program has always been there, but also required is professional development component, supporting teachers to enhance their capacity to support English learners and immigrant students. And also new is the parental engagement piece. So promoting family, parental, community participation. And those three, I think, are summarized on the next slide. Yeah, which looks at the first two prongs: English proficiency, academic achievement in core subjects. Those are two required areas. And then high quality professional development and outreach and assistance to families. Okay. Title III, whoops, back up a sec, could you? Yeah, because this is kind of important for you to know. And it's Title III, as well as I believe Title II and many of the other programs, have included a list of allowable activities. Title III actually has two lists. One is required activities, things you have to do, and then allowable activities, things that you can do with the funds. Title I, on the other hand, does not have a list of allowable activities. Most other programs have that, and it's really handy. It's really nice. Here are the things you can do. Title I doesn't have that. And the reason is because the plan should be driving the allowable use. The needs assessment, your program plan, that's how you identify the allowable activities in many ways. So there's no list for Title I as there is for Title III. There's a handy dandy list of things you have to do, things you can do. And then here's why we call Title III the most restrictive. Title III is the only program that requires that the funds be supplemental to not only your state and local funds, but to other federal program services. So if your program, if your Title I program at a school serves, and say you have a math intervention program at a school and you have an English learner who qualifies for that, then they should be allowed to receive that service under Title I. You don't spend Title III to pay for that service. They have to have access to Title I services. It doesn't mean you create a service under Title I for a student if that's not part of your defined program. But if it is, then that English learner student needs to have access to that service before they get Title III funded services. This makes Title III one of the most challenging programs to spend money in. So I advise you, keep an eye on the money for Title III and make sure it's getting spent, because more districts every year have, and this year we're good because we got a carryover, a waiver for this year, but in most years, districts get caught with Title III funds that they haven't spent that are going to expire, and they have to send them back to the feds, and you don't want to do that. So watch your Title III money and make sure it and we'll talk about spending timelines in the future, but it's one to keep your eyes on so you don't lose that money. Okay. All right, and these are our experts at LACO. If you don't know them, Ruth Baskett and Myrna Miranda Welsh are our English learner, the MOS unit. They're amazing, and connect with them on your specific questions on English learner programs. And now I'm going to turn over to Rachel Garcia, who's going to take you through Title IV, where I think there, oops, I'm sorry. And Adrienne, were there any questions before we turn over to Rachel?
No, there were no questions at this time.
Okay, good. Save them
We're
for
ready for Rachel.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Hello, everyone. So for Title IV, Part A, the purpose of Title IV, Part A is to provide all students with access to a well-rounded education, improve school conditions for student learning, and improve the use of technology in order to improve the academic achievement and digital literacy of all students. LEAs that receive $30,000 or more must conduct a comprehensive needs assessment at least once every 3 years, and based on the results of the comprehensive needs assessment, must use at least 20% of the funds to support well-rounded educational opportunities, also at least 20% of the funds for activities to support safe and healthy students in order to improve conditions for learning, and a portion of the funds must be used for activities to support the effective use of technology. In addition, no more than 15% of funds may be used for purchasing technology infrastructure, such as devices, equipment, software applications, or other one-time IT purchases. LEAs that receive less than $30,000 in Title IV Part A funds are not required to conduct a comprehensive needs assessment and may use funds in only one or more of the 3 content areas. It's also important to note that due to the COVID-19 crisis, California was granted a federal flexibility waiver that provides some flexibilities for Title IV. Under the waiver, for LEAs that received $30,000 or more in Title IV funds, the content area spending requirements and the 15% spending limit on the use of funds to purchase technology infrastructure have been waived for 2018-19 carryover funds and 2019-20 funds. This means, I'm sorry, if you could go back still. This means that LEAs are not required to use a minimum percentage in all 3 content areas and may spend more than 15% of funds to purchase technology infrastructure with 2018-19 carryover funds and 2019-20 funds. In addition, the needs assessment requirement has been waived for the 2019-20 school year. Next slide, please. So as a condition for receiving Title IV Part A funds, LEAs must assure that it will prioritize the distribution of funds to schools served by the LEA based on one or more of the criteria listed here. So are among the schools with the greatest needs, have the highest numbers or percentages of low-income students, are identified for CSI or TSI, are identified as a persistently dangerous school. Now, Title IV is also a district level entitlement, and there is no requirement for school level allocations. It's also important to note that Title IV Part A funding is based on Title I, so only LEAs that received Title I funding in the prior year are eligible for Title IV Part A. Under federal transferability, LEAs can transfer Title IV funds to support other ESSA titles, such as Title I, Title II, or Title III. However, if an LEA transfers Title IV funds, the LEA is still responsible for meeting the Title IV Part A legal requirements, which are a condition of accepting the funds. Next slide. So Title IV Part B, 21st Century Community Learning Centers. The purpose of Title IV Part B is to support the creation of community learning centers that provide academic enrichment opportunities during non-school hours for children, particularly students who attend high poverty and low performing schools. The 21st Century Community Learning Centers program helps students meet state and local academic standards in core subjects such as reading and math, offers students a broad array of enrichment activities that can complement the regular academic program, and offers educational services to the families of participating children. Local competitive 3 to 5 year subgrants are awarded to eligible entities with priority to applications that target services to students who primarily attend schools that are implementing comprehensive support and improvement activities or targeted support and improvement activities, and enroll students who may be at risk for academic failure, dropping out of school, involvement in criminal or delinquent activities, or who lack strong positive role models. And entities eligible to apply for funding include LEAs, community-based organizations, other public or private entities, or a consortium of 2 or more such entities. Next slide. So Title IV Part C is expanding opportunity through quality charter schools, and the purpose of Title IV Part C, as described in federal statute, is to improve the U.S. education system and opportunities by supporting innovation in public education, to provide financial assistance for planning, program design, and initial implementation of charter schools, increase the number of high-quality charter schools, evaluate the impact of charter schools, encourage states to provide support for charter schools for facilities financing, expand opportunities for children with disabilities, ELs, and other traditionally underserved students to attend charter schools, support efforts to strengthen charter school authorizing process, support quality, accountability, and transparency in the operational performance of public chartering agencies. And Title IV Part C funds are provided through competitive grants to states with subgrants to open and prepare for operation of new or replicated charter schools, as well as through direct competitive grants to charter schools for construction and a renovation of charter school facilities. And so these funds do not go through the consolidated application. For additional information on or questions on this, you can contact the CDE Charter School Office. And so now I will turn it back over to Bonnie for Title V.
Okay, Adrienne, before we go ahead,
Hi.
were there any questions on Title IV? I know that's been a challenging one.
Yes, we do have one question, and this they're asking, was the use of Title IV funds extended like the other titles?
Rachel, well, I'll address that. Yes, it was. And in the spring of this year, particularly because of Title IV flexibilities, CDE opened, excuse me, the consolidated application to allow districts to make changes. Some districts transferred their Title IV funds out and hadn't spent them because of school closures. Because of the allowability of the carryover, they were allowed to reallocate that. But yes, the 2018 Title IV funds, and were extended by the waiver. And by the way, we did see a number of districts and charters that hadn't spent their Title IV 2018 funds. So you might have some extra money there in that pot. So bottom line, long answer, yes, it was extended. All right, Title V. Title V Part A isn't really a program. What it is, it alludes to what Rachel was just talking about, and that's federal transferability. This is a section of the law that allows for that transferability. New under ESSA always had transferability before, but the amount you could transfer was limited. Under ESSA, 100% of Title II or Title IV funds may be transferred to either Title I, II, III, or IV. But funds cannot be transferred out of Title I or Title III. They can only be transferred into those programs. And once you've transferred the funds, those funds become subject to the program to which they're transferred. So if you transfer Title II into Title I, they then follow the rules of Title I. And consultation with private schools is required prior to making any transfers because that impacts the services available for those private schools. And again, as Rachel mentioned, you're still responsible for meeting the program requirements, even if the funding's moved out. The important thing to keep in mind about federal transferability, as you can see, you're moving funds out of a less restrictive program into a more restrictive program. So we said Title II, least restrictive program. Title IV, also you can see a lot of flexibility, especially now. This is what districts found. They transferred the funds out and found they'd put them into a more restrictive program. You can see if you move Title II into Title III, you'd have a lot of restrictions. So you can do it. And if you have a program and needs, that's great, and you should do it, but just be aware of that. All right, under Title V also is Part B. This doesn't apply to most districts in our county. These are programs for rural and low-income districts. And it's called the Rural Education Achievement Program, and there's two parts to it. And these represent the two kinds of grants we talked about earlier. The Small Rural Achievement Program is a direct discretionary grant from the U.S. Department of Education. Look at all the words we talked about, they're in there. Direct, discretionary, from ed, okay? So it's a direct grant, comes from the U.S. Department of Education, and you have to apply for it in order to get it. It's only for LEAs with an ADA under 600 students, and it can be used for activities. It's a very flexible program. You can use these funds for activities under Title I, II, III, or IV, Part A, for Title IV, also for Part B, or for any parent and family engagement activity. So these are very flexible funds. They're meant to support rural, low-income districts to better serve their students. The other program, Rural Low-Income School Program, RLIS, it's generally referred to. This is a state-administered program, and you do apply for this one through the consolidated application, and the funds are used as similarly to the other grant. So one's a direct federal grant, the other is a state administered grant. You can only apply for one of them, you can't get both. Okay. All right, on to the next one, which hardly anyone gets because these are direct grants that go to Indian tribes or organizations serving American Indians, Native Hawaiian, or Alaskan Native populations. So usually these go to various organizations as opposed to school districts. Again, these are direct grants from the U.S. Department. The next is Impact Aid. A lot of districts don't get it, but what Impact Aid is a formula grant to LEAs that serve large numbers of federally connected children who are based on federal property within the LEA's jurisdiction. Generally, that means military bases. So if you have a military base within your district boundaries and you serve lots of those kiddos from the military base, then you're eligible for Impact Aid. And it's totally unrestricted funds. It's like general funds, so no requirements on there, no spending regulations that you have to use it for certain purposes. So it's great, but doesn't apply to a lot of districts. And then finally, Title VIII is not a program. It's a compilation of all sorts of things. It includes a lot of requirements that are in your legal assurances that you agree to when you submit the consolidated application. There's the ability to consolidate administrative costs. That's described in that section. The unsafe school choice option for persistently dangerous schools is described there. The important thing, all your private school requirements for Title II, III, and IV are included. Title I, and it's special, has its own list of requirements for private schools services, but Title II, III, and IV are all in Title VIII. Also, it includes some definitions. What does evidence-based means? What's MTSS mean? So a lot of things in Title VIII, but no funded programs come out of Title VIII. The last funded program is the next one. Whoops, what happened to McKinney event? Oh, Title VIII, it's still there, sorry. Okay, I lose Title VIII. I just don't want to lose the homeless program. That's important. I'll get in trouble. California State Plan, yeah. The California State Plan, we put it here because it defines a lot of the requirements in the federal ESSA. So before we could be approved for funding, the state had to develop a plan. It was approved in 2018. That's where the state accountability system is defined. That's where the criteria for identifying CSI and ATSI schools comes in. That's where educator equity comes in. So the state also had to write a plan, and you'll find a lot of things in the state plan, but usually those are I don't know, parsed out for you in other places, but just so you're aware that exists. All right, we came to the end. I was going to tell you this would probably end early, but that didn't quite work out. Our next module is Thursday, and it's going to be on district planning requirements, the LCAP, the continuity plan, federal addendum, CONAP, all those things that are district level. Any final things we need, Adrienne? Or
No questions were placed in the chat.
Okay, thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. I think the next slide has our contact information. So if you wake up in the morning and say, no, that didn't make sense, send us an email and we'll be happy to get in touch with you and support you. But pleasure to not see you out there, but at least see your names out there. And we'll hope to see some of you on Thursday and at our future modules. All right. We'll leave the chat open for a few minutes in case you think of something.